Hello, welcome back to Talking Europe. We are at the European Commission with the Commissioner for Justice, Civil Liberties and Home Affairs, Didier Reynders. Thank you very much for being on the programme.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to start off with talking about the situation in Ukraine, of course a huge concern for people across Europe. The European Commission's President, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that the EU is firmly on Ukraine's side. But in terms of strong actions, it's really the EU's military guarantor, the United States via NATO, and the United Kingdom, the EU's former member, that have really perhaps taken the sternest stance so far. Where is the EU in all of this?
Of course, we try to follow the situation on the military side, but it's more for the NATO to do that with some European member states, of course, in the NATO, but it's the responsibility of the NATO and different allies to do that. We are taking part in the diplomatic talks, and that's through first the High Representative, Josep Borrell, but I know that there are direct talks between the US and Ukraine, but also with Russia, and there are direct talks also in the Normandy format with some member states, again, Germany and France. But the most important part for the Commission is to work about the sanctions if there is something against Ukraine. And you know that we took sanctions after the annexation of Crimea, but now everything is on the table about energy, about financial services, about all the possibilities to react due to the size of the aggression or the possible aggression from Russia to Ukraine. So the main responsibility for the Commission is to prepare the possible sanctions, but of course also to take part in diplomatic talks, because that's the priority, and to try to have a de-escalation through diplomatic talks.
Well, indeed, on sanctions, I know that there's work underway on a wide array of sanctions, as you say, but given that quite heavy sanctions have been in place since 2014, and we've got to this point now, what impact do you think these new sanctions would have?
Well, it's possible to go very far with the sanctions. The reason why I said everything is on the table. So not only individual sanctions against people involved in a possible aggression with freezing of their assets or a visa ban and travel ban, but also very more concrete economic sanctions. Transfer of technologies coming from Europe, but also in coordination with the US, and to do the same on the US side like in the EU. Energy, because you know that it's an important part of the Russian budget, the energy and the gas, of course, provided to Europe, but to other partners, and then maybe also the financial services. So there are a lot of possibilities to act more, maybe, and deeper than it was the case maybe in 2014. We took many decisions at that time, but everything is on the table today, and I'm sure that it's very important to try to explain that in the diplomatic talks too. So to say what should be or could be the reaction if there is a possible aggression.
One individual EU member state particularly involved in this is Germany. There's been widespread calls on Germany to use the leverage of the Nord Stream gas pipeline to put pressure on Russia. But Berlin does seem to be acting quite cautiously at this point. How big a problem is it for you that the EU's biggest member state, this big economic power, is acting so hesitantly, while at the same time, as you say, the Commission is preparing these wide-ranging sanctions? But
first of all, Germany is in the diplomatic talks because you know that there are new discussions in the Normandy formats with Ukraine, Russia, France and Germany. So that's the first element. The second element, we prepare possible sanctions, but also we prepare some solutions for the member states. If you look to the situation in Germany with some important part of the gas consumption coming from Russia, it's important to think about other kind of suppliers. And first of all, we are thinking about LNG and the possibility to receive more LNG from other partners.
Liquid natural gas.
Yes, of course. And so we try to be sure that it's possible to shift to other kind of suppliers if it's needed. And that's very important to keep unity in the European Union, because you're right, we need to have the 27 member states on the same line. And I'm sure that is the case, and certainly with Germany for the moment.
There are question marks over the unity regarding Hungary. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been in Moscow for a one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin just this week. Given the current sensitive state of relations, to put it mildly, and Mr. Orban's past warm words about President Putin, are you concerned?
Well, it was all the time very difficult to maintain unity in the European Union when we will have discussed about sanctions, also in 2014 and in other moments. But at the end, it was possible to do that. So I'm sure that there's a huge pressure coming from different member states to Russia. It's maybe useful to have a sort of mediation also through Hungary. But at the end, the problem is to see if there is or not an aggression in Ukraine. That will be the key issue. For the moment, there are many actions to try to go to a de-escalation and to avoid such an aggression. But I'm quite confident that at the end of the process, or we'll have a success with the diplomatic talks, or we will have the capacity to keep unity to take sanctions.
Speaking about another matter that involves Hungary, a major preoccupation for you as Justice Commissioner, of course, degradations of rule of law in EU member states, and Hungary and Poland, two countries of concern in various ways, or governments, I should say. I just want to first talk about the fact that both of those states have now acknowledged spying on their own citizens with the Pegasus spyware. I know you're well aware of this, but just to recap for our viewers, Pegasus enables the attacker to turn a smartphone essentially into a surveillance device without the user knowing. It could turn on the camera, for example, turn on the microphone, read messages, and there wouldn't necessarily be a trace of that. Didier, Reynders' targets have included obviously journalists, lawyers, most of them who were not and will not be under criminal investigation. Ursula von der Leyen said last year, if the spying allegations were true, they would be completely unacceptable. Is the Commission going to take action now that there's been this admission from Polish and Hungarian authorities?
First of all, it's a responsibility for the national authorities to react. And you have seen that there were some reactions from the data protection authorities, certainly in Hungary. And we have said that it's very important to have concrete investigations about that through the national data protection authorities. It's in line with the GDPR to try to do that, but also in line with the national laws when there are some actions coming from national security services. And then, of course, it's possible also to go to justice if you don't have a satisfactory reaction from the DPA.
So you would wait for the national authorities to...
We are not waiting. We are following the situation very closely, but we want to see if it's possible for such an independent body, the Data Protection Authority in Hungary and maybe also in Poland, to react, to explain if they have seen some problems or not. I want also to insist that it's very important for the concerned citizens, maybe with such a kind of attack with Pegasus, to go to the DPA and to go maybe also to justice, because that's the framework of the GDPR, to say that there is an individual right to react.
I just wonder though, do you trust that these investigations will be carried out in an independent and transparent way, given that, for example, the Commission is in an ongoing dispute with Poland over the independence of its judiciary, or non-independence? You know, there's this daily fine of €1 million that was imposed by the Court of Justice of the EU in October for failing to dissolve a disciplinary body for judges that was found to be against European law. Poland has not been paying that fine. It is refusing to pay that fine. Do you trust these authorities to carry out these investigations as you suggest?
No, investigations is first of all, I said, with the data protection authorities, and you know that in the European regulation there are independent bodies in the member states to do that. So we need to verify if they are doing that, and we need also to see if they are independent. So that's the responsibility of the Commission. But for the investigations, it's a national responsibility again. It was a decision of the European Parliament and the European Council to do that. Then you spoke about the fine. Of course, it's on the basis of a request from the Commission that we have had first a condemnation of Poland about the disciplinary regime of the judges. Then we have received, on the request of the Commission, interim measures. It was without a possible implementation by Poland, so we have asked for a fine. And on the request of the Commission, there is now a fine of €1 million per day. And of course, we have asked to Poland to pay. If they don't pay, we will recover the money on all the payments transferring by the Commission to the member state to Poland. So it's very positive in such a way that we have the responsibility to collect the money. To give an example now, with such a fine of 1 million per day, till the 10th of January, that means 69 million. And we have asked to Poland to pay. If it's not the case, we will recover by ourselves the money on the different payments organized by the European Union to Poland.
Just on that though, the intention obviously to penalise the Polish government. But isn't there a risk that Polish citizens could feel that they are being sanctioned?
We don't want to have a sanction. The goal is not the sanction. The goal is the full compliance with the commitment taken by the member states in the treaties and to apply correctly the decision of the Court of Justice.
All right, Didier, Reynders, unfortunately that's all we have time for, but thank you very much for speaking to us on Talking Europe.
My pleasure. See you back.
Before we close off the programme, we are going to turn our hand to a little fake news debunking. This week, Georgina Robertson has been looking into how a press conference by the European Medicines Agency was distorted by both conventional and social media.
Did the European Medicines Agency say we should stop using COVID-19 booster vaccines? A claim made by many social media users after a clip from a press conference by the EMA was published online.
Yeah, indeed. There are two concerns here. Is that if we have a strategy in which we give boosters, let's say, every 4 months approximately, we will end up potentially having problem with the immune response.
Social media users waded in and Twitter posts questioned boosters or called for an end to them altogether, including French centre-right MEP Nadine Morano, who picked up on reports and called for an end to repeated vaccinations. But what was the EMA's whole message about immune response? On the 11th of January, during an EMA press conference, the discussion turned to whether repeated boosters should be given within short timeframes. Mr. Cavalleri's response was that it might be the best option on the table.
It can be done once or maybe twice, but it's not something that we can think should be repeated constantly. And it would be much better to start thinking about an administration of boosters that is more spaced in time.
And he went on to suggest the immune response problem, but that was only part of his answer. The context of the whole answer shows a subtle but important distinction between what Mr. Cavalleri said and what was tweeted. He did not say boosters are a bad idea. The warning was to use them judiciously, like a flu shot at the start of the cold season. He advised EU citizens to complete their primary vaccinations, including, for those eligible, getting a booster jab.
Well, that is it for this edition of Talking Europe. Thanks again to our guest Didier Reynders, and thanks to you for watching. See you again soon.